So hi, my name is Cujo. So a couple weeks ago, I finished a book called The Wisdom of Life by Arthur Schopenhauer, and I'm just going to kind of talk about it and give you the ideas that I took away from reading it, and I have some notes here from while I was reading it, so I'm just going to kind of talk about what I took away from it. Arthur Schopenhauer was a philosopher that lived from 1788 to 1860. He is most famous for influencing Nietzsche a lot in his writings, which is how I figured about Schopenhauer, so I decided that I wanted to read him. And he's also influenced a lot by Buddhism, which I'm a very big fan of Buddhism and follow a lot of books on Buddhism and Sanskrit. I'm just a big fan of Buddhism and a lot of the ideas. But Arthur Schopenhauer is most famously known for incorporating Buddhism into his writings, so that combined with influencing Nietzsche made me want to read him, and this is the text that I ended up reading. This book is a smaller section of a bigger work called Hererga and Paralimpomena. I can't read German, I'm sorry. But that book is just a collection of essays and writings that Schopenhauer made, and it was published towards the end of his life. But yeah, to jump into this and to give context to what I'm about to talk about, Schopenhauer was kind of a big pessimist when it came to philosophy, and he viewed himself as a materialist, and therefore he was very blunt about his ideas and overall kind of views life being inherently just suffering. So with that context, hopefully it sets you up to understand some of the ideas that I present a little bit better, but I'm just going to kind of go down the notes and then talk about what I wrote down. Schopenhauer starts out the book with saying that things are always going to be the same in terms of two groups. There's going to be small intellectuals and then a foolish majority, and this is going to be a constant throughout the history of the world. There's always going to be small intellects contrasted by a big majority of fools. And Schopenhauer then states how he's going to show us how to live a good life and be a part of these small intellects rather than a part of the foolish majority. So there's four main sections of this book, and the first one is division of the subject. He starts off very strong with something that resonates a lot with me. He says that man's happiness is deemed from what he is rather than what he has. And in my interpretation and understanding of this, Schopenhauer is talking about how the beingness of the person, no matter what the circumstance is actually what creates the happiness rather than like what they own or the things that they have ownership of or perceive to have ownership of. So he says that if you align with the gifts that you're given and you develop your mental culture, you'll find happiness and success even from a state of perceived lack. So even if you live like a non-wealthy, you live a life of more poverty, part of the working class, that you're actually going to live a happy life because the beingness or the isness of the person behind that creates depth and meaning in life. And to contrast it, the person with a lot of outward riches, but a very poor sense of self-development, and there's not many gifts cultivated or mental culture cultivated, will inevitably be miserable, and over time will lose those riches and then become poor. I think there's truth in this. I think when you give your brain something to focus on, like a project or things you're trying to accomplish, or in terms of developing skills for the self and understanding the self more, that just leads to overall more well-being. And even if it comes from a state of I don't have access to many options or just a sense of lack, it still makes the individual happy. I mean, for me, I think that there's a lot of truth in this. I didn't go to college and am unsure if I end up going to college in the future or not, potentially, but I feel like there's a lot of depth. Even though I didn't go to college, I still cultivate a lot of my own education and my own knowledge of the world, and I don't need someone to like guide that for me. And the fact that I'm willing to do that for myself, I think gives a lot of depth and meaning and well-being to my life, because I have cultivated Cujo, or whatever you would like to call me. But moving on, he uses this idea to talk about subject and environment and how much the environment plays in making the subject and the subject on the environment. And he ultimately concludes that the subject bends the environment to his will and makes it his own rather than the other way around. So the subject is actually not created by the environment, but the subject creates the environment that reflects the form behind the beingness behind the person. In order for this video to exist, there has to be a cultivated person behind said video that is creating this, that had to be cultivated and had the environment around designed in a particular way to actually make this a success per se, or make a successful video, I guess. I guess in this context, I mean success in terms of just making the video and then publishing it. So it takes a certain type of person to do that, and then to bend the environment to my will to make that. It's the same for anyone who's like making a video on this website or trying to accomplish anything with their life. Like, there's the person that's behind it cultivates an environment that supports that. So moving on to chapter 2. Chapter 2 is on personality, or what a man is. So he talks about that isness that we've been talking about. He starts off with talking about how health is very important, that if you have good health, then you're able to enjoy the experience of life. And if you don't take care of your health proactively and it begins to suffer, then it takes away from a lot of enjoyment of life. So cultivating good health and maintaining good health, it should be your number one priority, because the vessel is all that you have, and it's what you experience life through. He also very slyly says that good health brings beauty, which is an open letter of recommendation. If you have good health, then you're going to be more beautiful and give you more prospects in terms of maybe employment or love interests and all sorts of stuff like that. He talks on how men of intelligence prefer solitude over the normal man who needs to socialize in order to gain what they're lacking with socialization, but the man of intelligence doesn't need that. He does it for himself, what they're looking for from socialization, which both parties are looking for an obsolescence of pain. They don't want to experience pain. The man of intelligence does it in the form of vices. He invests himself into a vice that he wants to progress, and the typical man does it with socialization, so he can push the pain out of mind and not have to face it and use socialization to avoid it. The only drawback that he talks about is the man of intellect, when these vices aren't correctly pursued or there's failure in the pursuit of trying to further a vice, he feels pain a lot more intensely and suffers a lot more than the typical man. So it's a double-edged sword. If you're a man of intellect, then you feel pain a lot more when you aren't able to successfully pursue the vices that you choose. So solitude is something he talks about. Solitude requires a lot less of the individual socially, as in like they have to literally physically remove themselves from a lot of social situations in order to gain solitude. And the typical man fears solitude because to them solitude means death. Yet for an intellectual, they need solitude in order to grow their own intellect, to feed an intellect that they have, and then also to be able to do the work that they need to do. Which I think for me, like any creator on this platform, I'm speaking for you, I'm speaking for myself. Like, I need that specific amount of solitude time in order to actually do the work, for one, and for two, to also think about ideas and do the intellectual work or think about things and do a lot more reading and all good stuff. I love my solitude. I would encourage you to cultivate it if you don't have, well, solitude, I guess. And then Schopenhauer has a hot take of the typical man have a very low, dull uninterest in being an intellectual, and they subconsciously envy the intellectuals. They wish that they were more like them. So then these same people double down on physicality and appearances and place their importance on that, when intellectuals actually value ideas over physicality. And this is how he concludes the second section. Section 3 is on property, or what a man has. To contrast with the isness, he then talks about the hasness. And to pretty much summarize this chapter, he talks about how anything that you own, actually you don't own it. That thing actually owns you. And he uses a man's wife and children for this example. If you think about a family and a man to his family, you can say that a man owns his family, but because of the responsibility that he has for taking care of the family that he has, the family actually owns him. The reason for that being is the man needs to be around to maintain said family, and if he doesn't, then he ends up losing the family, which can cause him a lot of suffering. So when he takes on the family, he can perceive that he owns them, but in trying to maintain a relationship with a wife and kids and trying to maintain a house and stuff like these are all things that he's enslaved to because of responsibility. And if you don't have these things, if you have a lot more openness and freedom, that is freedom. So living as a minimalist basically means the openness for things to happen, since you don't have your attention tied to trying to maintain things that you have or that you claim to have, which in turn just end up owning you. Like, same for everything that's in this room. Like, if I lay claim to it and then it becomes damaged and I try to repair it, all of this stuff owns me because I have to give my attention into trying to maintain it or move it somewhere. Or if I want to keep it, then it owns me because I have to give my attention to it, basically. He also talks about how the poor tend to be poor because they don't know how money operates in the world. So the rich know how money operates, so the richer end up getting richer and the poor get poorer. And you have to keep in mind that Schopenhauer came from an imperialist Germany. So it was like if you got poor in an imperialist society, like you were just kind of fucked. There was no social support to actually catch you or anything. And to end out this chapter, he talks about how the people who are poor in your family, when it comes to inheritance and your will, you should leave them the interest from the capital that you have, but then give the capital to someone in the family or somebody else that actually knows how to use the capital to make sure that the capital isn't lost. With this advice, you kind of win the best of both worlds. I mean, ideally, if they don't know about capital or how capital works, you give them interest, they're like, yeah, we got his money. But these are different times. Schopenhauer was in the era of duels, which we're going to talk about in the fourth section, which is what we're moving into, which is part 4. That has 5 different sections, and it is position or a man's place in the estimation of others. Section 1, reputation, talks about how honor and esteem is important, but it's separate from a man's happiness, and that you don't need honor and esteem in order to live a happy existence or a sense of well-being with your existence. And actually, if you have high honor and high esteem, it takes away the potential for being able to live well, because if people hold you in high honor and high esteem, it gives you more noise and more people want to be around you. Not good things for the intellect. So if you're able to retreat from the world, then it gives you a bigger sense of peace, because you don't have like this social abstraction coming into the work and into your mind and constantly having noise around you all the time. So he doesn't care about reputation. Section 2 is on pride. Schopenhauer actually talks about how modesty became a virtue because a majority of people didn't have something to be prideful about, so then they became jealous of the people who did have things to be prideful about, and then over time modesty became a virtue for that reason, which I think there's validity to this point, because I'm very proud of the things that I've done, regardless of people think it is or isn't something I should be proud of. I'm proud of the person that I become behind the work that I do. And I think a really great example of someone who has pride and at the same time makes extremely good work is Tyler, the Creator. Like if you listen to interviews with Tyler, he's extremely prideful, but it's a good thing because he cares about the work that he does, and the pride that he has fuels the work and just makes him continually outdo himself. And it's something that I think people who have pride in their work try to do, is try to make better and better work. And he talks about how people who are modest tend to fear judgment socially, because when you're prideful, people don't like seeing that, and for the most part just want to tear you down because they themselves don't have something to be proud of. And the mistake that most people end up making is they chase vanity when you should chase a being, or creating and cultivating the you-ness, the isness of you, to create things that you can be proud of and do things that you can be proud of, rather than just having like a bunch of shit around you, pretty much. Individuality is way better than nationality, and people cling to nationality because they have a weak individuality, is what Schopenhauer says. Section 3 is on rank, and it's going to be a very quick section for you. He says that rank means absolutely nothing, and that actually it's more important to pay attention to a man's word and his follow-through rather than his rank. Because hierarchically, like whatever your rank is, the rank is null and void if you have not good word or follow-through. But that the only indication that rank could give is the higher the rank, the more likely that good word and follow-through there is, but it's not a guarantee. So he says it's kind of pointless to pay attention to rank. So yeah, told you, quick section. Moving on to section 4, which is honor. He starts off with very objectively explaining what the use of honor is in society. Honor is used to basically ensure one's survival and then be able to win power over others and influence them. But then he ends up going on this huge rant about knightly honor. If you were to be alive back in like the late 1700s or the early 1800s, honor worked in a way where if someone injured you or hurt you, you would have to reclaim that honor. So like say if I smacked you in the face, you would have to smack me back in the face to reclaim your honor. But then in doing that, you also injure my own honor, and then it like ends up being like an eye for an eye type deal, which Schopenhauer points out how stupid and foolish all of this activity is. He very funnily talks about how people who partake in knightly honor still need to just be hung and whipped. Just like, damn, Schopenhauer, you tell him, but goddamn. So he discredits knightly honor, that duels and reclaiming of honor is foolish, and that even Stoic philosophy had honor down to a T, and then for some reason 1800s culture just completely forgot the point of what honor is, so knightly honor was stupid. And then he calls the honor that probably me and you live by civic honor. And civic honor, to boil it down to one attribute, is just internal accountability, that you are responsible for yourself and the ideas and the virtues that you cultivate, and anything outside of you doesn't sway you from the person that you become. And so there's a ton of self-respect with civic honor, and the knightly honor lacks self-respect, and you react to every single thing that happens outside of you, is the idea. So yeah, let's be civically honorable. Please don't slap me, or else I'm gonna have to slap you back, and we're gonna have to have a duel in the street, and that would be kind of illegal and unfortunate now. So anyway, section 5 on fame. I think Schopenhauer actually uses duality a lot in his writings, because Schopenhauer also talks about 2 different types of fame. One fame being like a impactful fame that declines very rapidly, and then like a compounding fame that is essentially the person is unheard of for most of their life, and then towards the end of it, they become increasingly more popular to where it just compounds over time because they discovered truths about the humanness of existence or human nature that these other people like essentially contributed to noise the most, and then declined very quickly because they had nothing of value to add. So impact fame is something that you want to avoid, obviously, because you get impact fame and then quickly lose it, and all that does is kind of just add a bunch of noise and uncontentment in your life. And this compounding fame is basically the one you want, because you don't get like the noise and the downsides of fame, and you get to focus on the work. And then towards the end of your life, you go down in history, and there's an immortalness to your name and image that you have in the works that you do. He uses Stoic philosophers. I think that Schopenhauer did like Stoic philosophy, reading this quite a bit, because he talks about Seneca and the old philosopher dudes that have stayed in our literature for like 2,000 years. And there's probably truth in it, because he didn't become famous until he was like old as hell, if you even just look at him in this picture. And the type of person that discovers new theory and human truths is a person with a great heart and a great mind, because that's what it requires to find truth, is what Schopenhauer says here. And yeah, that's pretty much the entirety of The Wisdom of Life by Arthur Schopenhauer. At least the Spark Notes Cujo version, and what I took away from the book. He comes from a different time, and I think honestly, like, he might have just been stroking his own ego in this a little bit from reading it. I don't think it completely discredits his writings, though. I think there's a lot of truth to be found in this book. There's like, I remember a little section where he's very slightly racist, and I shouldn't even say slightly, like he's blatantly racist to black people, but he also grew up in a time where that was accepted, so take that as you will. I don't agree with it, but I don't think it necessarily takes away from the other ideas that he presents. But yeah, this is pretty much like a breakdown of The Wisdom of Life by Arthur Schopenhauer. If you enjoyed it, please like, subscribe, smash comments, YouTube algorithm stuff. It helps out this channel and all that good stuff. Hopefully you found some value and maybe some insights in whatever I talked about. And maybe even if you're not into philosophy a whole bunch, it's getting you into philosophy. And maybe you pick up some Schopenhauer after watching this. So, yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you for taking the time to watch this video. I love you very much, and goodbye now.